Hello everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our festive bear. It's taken me a while to get part 2 done. That's mainly because I've been doing a lot of watercolour lately, just been playing about with different papers and different paints, all sorts of fun. So poor Mr. Bear got a little bit neglected, but I'm here for it and we are going to get him finished today. And I've changed the angle of my camera slightly so that you can see. I noticed when I was editing the first part there were parts where my hand was in front of the camera, which wasn't great. I am in the house still. It's really cold and wet and horrible in the UK at the moment, so I'm in the safety and warmth of the house. It's quite late at night again, so it's just me. And this time I am zoomed in closer and you're at an angle, so hopefully my hand won't get in the way. Brushes today, I am using a teeny tiny, this is a graduate spotter brush. This is going to be for the tiny details that we've got on there. I am using my Princeton number 6, which is my favourite brush. I have got another graduate here, which is a filbert. Now I use this one to lift out colour. I don't know if we're going to need it, but I've got it anyway. I've got a slightly larger round brush. I believe this is a number 10 and this one is a number 5. So those are the brushes we've got. I'm still using the Cotman paints, obviously, and although you can't see the actual palette because I'm zoomed in, I'll show you what I've done here. I have mixed up some rather watery raw umber. I've got some burnt umber and I've got some Payne's grey, and I think it's going to be a mixture of those three are going to get us finished on the actual bear. So I have still got everything to hand here, but like I say, you're zoomed in so you can't really see it. So today what we're going to do is we're going to put another layer on our bear. It's going to be a layer of the raw umber, and we're going to kind of do him section by section because I want to put some shadow in on as we go. So yeah, that's I think where we're going to start. So I'm going to be taking my number 6 brush and I'm going to be using the raw umber, and this is a really watery consistency. And I think I'm going to start on this arm. We're going to leave his face for now. We're going to start on this arm, and I'm just going to put a wash of colour literally over the top of what we've already got on there, over all the details that we put on there, to give that another layer and to darken him down there. And that's what we're going to do. Now while it's wet, we don't want it too wet, I want it damp, so I'm going to leave that just for a second to dry off a little bit and move on to this arm. I'm going to do the same thing on this arm. So using that same mix, I'm going to come down over all those details that we put on there and darken that area on this side of his arm. Down, like so. And now, while this arm is now damp, I'm going to just lift out a little area just on the side of his arm there to give a little bit of a highlight. And then taking the Payne's grey, and I only want a tiny bit of this, I'm dabbing this off on my damp cloth. I'm just going to come in on this side of his arm, and while it's still damp, I'm just going to drop in some of that Payne's grey. Now I love Payne's grey for shadows, so hopefully you can see that has given him bit of a rounder looking arm. Just come in with a clean damp brush and lift a bit of that paint out there. I'm going to do the same on this side. So I'm just going to make sure that's not too dry. It's so warm in here, it's drying really fast. Just dampen that down again. And then same thing on the inside of this arm, over where the details were, just there. I'm going to drop in some of that Payne's Grey. Just work it out so that there's not a harsh line there. This side is a lot darker anyway because the light's coming from this area, so we're not going to put a highlight on that bit. Okay, so working our way over the bear, I'm going to come down to his feet. Now, his feet are darker, as you can see, we did them darker initially. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to use some of this burnt umber. Now, this is a slightly thicker consistency, I would say milk. And we're just going to come over his little pads on his feet. And we're going to put some of that in there. I'm going to rinse out my brush. And I am going to use my filbert. I'm just going to dampen it down and clean it off. And just under where his toes are, just going to lift some of that colour up. And again, just on the bottom of his foot there, like so. And then while that's still damp, taking a detail brush, I'm going to go into the Payne's Grey and I'm just going to put an indication of where his little toes are. Now they've disappeared, but there is a little shadow line in there, and obviously under his little toes he's got little shadows as well, so just give an indication at the moment of where those are. You can soften that up with a damp brush so there's not a harsh line there, and just added that shadow in. A little bit more there, it was a little bit too wet. There, so that's his little feet, or his little foot. I might actually even put some touch, just a touch, just down the bottom here, just to make it look a little bit rounder. Like so. I'll probably come back and put a little bit more on that in a moment. I'm going to do the same with the other foot, so back into the burnt umber. I'll give him a layer of the burnt umber on his foot. And then back into the Payne's Grey, and this one is a lot more in shadow, so I want to add, while it's still wet, shadow around this side of his foot. And I'm going to let that dry a little bit now. I'm going to come back in here and just define these little toes a little bit more, because it's now dried a little bit. Like so. A little bit more of the Payne's Grey, and on this foot we've got a shadow here where I suppose it's kind of the ball of his foot, and then we've got again his little toe pads coming up there. Just reinforce that shadow if you need to. I think we'll put a bit more shadow in with a Payne's grey down the bottom of his foot and up the side. Rinse your brush off, dry it so it's just damp, and then just soften that shadow in if you need to. Like so. It's better. Rinse and dry that off. And I think his arms are almost dried. Now as you can see, as it's drying, it's lightening up, and you can start to see the detail coming through again. But, I mean, we are going to add more detail on the top, but he's looking good, Right, so coming back into the raw umber, I'm now going to go up to his ears, and we're going to go straight over all that detail that we put on there. Like so, and same on the other ear. Like so. And then taking the darker burnt umber, we are going to go in the middle of his little ears. Like that. Now I've done this because I don't mind, in fact it'll add to it if that bleeds out a little bit onto the previous colour. Now take some more of that Payne's grey and just very carefully I'm going to add some Payne's grey just where his ear connects there. Rinse and just soften that shadow in. This ear, because it's curved over, has also got shadow, so right the way along there, and also just over where the change of colour is. Rinse, and dry off a little bit, and then soften the shadow in. Maybe need to deepen that a little bit more, so I'll add a little bit more of the Payne's grey mix. Just want to soften that line along there. We don't want a really harsh line there. So there we go, that's good. Now we're going to move down onto his belly on this side, and we're going to just repeat the process. We're going to come back into the raw umber, And we're going to give him an even wash over his belly. Right the way down this side of his little bow. And right the way up to his chin. And while this is still wet, we are going to drop in. I'm going to change down to a slightly smaller brush. This is the number 5 brush. And I'm going to come into the Payne's Grey. And I'm going to drop that in along this side. And also down the bottom here he's got a bit of a shadow going on. So all the way up there like that. And then just under his little bow, just slightly under there. I'm going to rinse off, make sure that's not too wet, and then I'm just going to come in and soften those up. Like so. Going to repeat this process again on the other side. And taking my slightly smaller brush again, back into the Payne's Grey. And the only shadow he's really got on this side is just here, from his little bow. And then he's got a tiny bit just there. I'm going to rinse off, dry it off slightly, and then just soften that in. On the edge, I'm going to add a little bit more, make that a bit darker. There. There. Rinse off again. So now all that's left to do is his little face. Now, obviously it's going to be a repeat of the process, but we've got a couple of things to take into consideration. We haven't put his eyes in yet, so we need to avoid those. And his muzzle is slightly lighter than his head. Not by much, but slightly lighter than his head. So we're going to be lifting some colour off there. And he has got a little bit of shadowing around his eyes. So, again, back into the raw umber mix. And being very careful, we'll start up here and just fill in, making sure to avoid, if you can, his eyes. I mean, don't worry too much if you can't, because they're quite dark anyway, but if you can avoid, just work your way around his little head, and then don't stop, go straight onto his muzzle, all the way around. I think I'm going to switch to my filbert for a second here. I'm going to rinse it off and just get rid of the excess water, and I'm going to lift off some colour from his nose there, and also from down the side of his face. I'm just rinsing and drying between doing this. So rinse off down the side of his face there, and a little bit more there. And now I'm going to take my slightly smaller round brush, and we're going to go back into the raw umber, and we are going to add another layer to his head. And this is so watery that it dries really, really fast, so I'm trying to be as quick as I can, right around the top of his head there, and then into the raw, the Payne's Grey. Just going to drop a tiny amount around where his eyes are, just to darken his eyes up a little bit around his eyes. And he's got a shadow here on his head, so we're going to put that in, and just on the top of his head there's the smallest shadow there, coming around this side, and down his muzzle there, and a tiny bit between his face and his muzzle there. Rinse off and soften that shadow in. We are going to put another layer onto his nose area, but I'm going to wait for this face to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to come back in to the raw umber, and just going to add another layer to his ears so that his ears match his face. There we go. And I'm going to do another wash just on this half of his arm here. And another wash on the inside of this arm over here. Well, initially I missed a bit there, so I'll just put that in quickly. On the inside of this arm. His feet are now dry, so taking more of that raw umber, we're going to come around the fur on his feet. With our first wash. And he's got a little bit, tiny little bit of leg there. We'll put that in. Put some shadow on there in a second. I'll come over to this one and do the same. Putting another layer onto his little furry foot. And there's another little tiny area there which I believe is his leg. Now I'm going to rinse and dry slightly. And come into the Payne's Grey, and just here between his foot and his leg, under here, because the bow is on top there, see, it's going to be quite dark, so we'll add that shadow in there now. And on this leg, just down here, in this area, is going to be quite dark too. Just check that there's no more shadowing. There's a little bit around the bottom of his foot there, so we can put that in. And a little bit around there. Rinse off. I'm just going to soften those shadows a touch. Right, I think his face will be okay now. So we're going to come back into this really, really wet mix. And we are going to avoid this area. So we're going to come just sweep down the side right under his nose to underneath his eye. And the same on this side, right under his nose, up to his eye. I'm going to rinse off, dry my brush off a little bit and just soften that edge there. So he should now have a nice lighter patch on the top of his little nose there. So now coming down to his belly, we are just going to literally wash over the whole area. So straight over the shadow area, all the way down there, back up to underneath his shadow area on his chin, and the same the other side. Right up into the shadow area. So we're giving everything another layer. I think his little foot is dry, so we'll go round and give him another little layer onto the fur around his foot. And like I said, my room is really hot, so this is drying super, super quick. It's almost like hot brush paper in here. If yours is not quite dry, between layers, don't do what I'm doing. Use a hairdryer, unless your room is very, very hot like mine. And now I'm going to go back into that darker mix, and I'm just going to add a touch of that dark colour onto his little toes, tops of his little toes and the ball of his foot, and around the bottom there where his little shadow is. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So around where the ball of his foot is, around where this shadow is, and just on the tops of his toes. Put some just under his toes as well. I'm going to rinse off, dry that off a little bit and soften that up. I'll just give his foot a little more depth. And that, for the most part, aside from his details, is the actual body and head, apart from his eyes, obviously, done. Now, I'm just going to rinse off my teeny tiny detail brush, and I'm going to come into the burnt umber, so the darker, thicker of the browns. I'm just going to put his mouth in here. Now, what I don't want to do is draw on a smile. Okay, so we're going to start just with that little detail brush. Let's get a bit more paint on there. And just make little tiny lines. Because it's more of a kind of shadow, really, that area. And when we come back over the top in a little bit, it will look even better than that. And I just want to put a little touch of that around his nose. I don't feel like his nose is dark enough around the edge there. So I'm just adding a little bit of darker colour. Rinse off my brush and soften that in. Just a touch. There, that's better. Okay, so next off we will be adding his little nose and his little eyes, and he'll start to come to life. It's always the point where you put the eyes on that they start to come to life. So yeah, we'll do that now. Right, we are back, and it is time to do our little bear's nose and eyes. And for this, I am just going to mix up some more Payne's Grey, because we've used quite a lot of that. So I'm just going to put a little bit more Payne's Grey into there. And also we are going to be using some lamp black for his eyes. Now I've already got a little bit mixed up there, so I'm just reactivating that. And we also want a tiny bit of yellow for his eyes. I'm using cadmium yellow hue, and honestly the tiniest little amounts, so don't mix much of that up. And now to start our bear's face, I am going to take my number 5 brush, and we're just going to come into this Payne's Grey. And now I want this to be a little bit thinner, so about the consistency of milk. And we're just going to go over the whole of his nose to start. So just really carefully go around his nose. Another rinse out, get rid of that brush. Now I'm going to pick my filbert up, give it a rinse in some clean water. Just dry that off so it's not sopping wet. And just stop the top of his nose to one side. I'm going to lift off a little highlight, like so. And then coming in with the detail brush into our black. we are going to come up to his eyes. Now for his eyes, he has got a tiny little highlight, so we're going to try and preserve that if we can. If not, we can always pop that in afterwards. You can use a gel pen, you can use watercolour white, you could scratch a little highlight out. There's many ways we can do it, but you know, I'd rather try and preserve some. So just on this edge of his eye is where the yellow is going to be. So we want to avoid that. So we'll leave that little area there for the yellow. And then I'm going to come around his eye. And the little highlight is just on the right hand side. So just like that. Okay. And just on this edge, the other side of where the yellow is going to go, I'm going to put a little line like that, and we're going to repeat that on the other side. So we are going to avoid the outer edge there, where the yellow part is going to go. Come around, and the highlight is going to be about there. So colour the rest of that one in. Make this one a little tiny bit bigger. That's better. And then a little line just on the outside edge like that. Okay, now we're going to have to let that dry. But I think I can come back to the nose because, like I said, it's so warm in here. And I'm going to go back into the black. And I am going to add these little nostrils in. They're not really nostrils, as you will see. They are more of like a rounded V shape. So I'm just going to dab some of that off and get the shape in first. So they are kind of that shape. And the same this side. We'll darken them in a second. And then just on the centre, he's got a little line that comes up his little nose. Like that. I'm going to come back in to the black. And now we've put the initial line in, I'm just going to darken those in. And then on this edge, we're going to make it thicker. And on this edge, we are going to make it thicker. We can darken that little nose line up a little touch. And then in a minute, we're going to come back in. Once that's dried off a little bit, we're going to come back in with some Payne's Grey. So I'm going to rinse off my spotter, and I just want to darken his mouth area. So I've still got a little bit of that darker brown in my palette, so I'm going to use that. That's the burnt umber. And as we did before, from the spot under the line under his little nose, and then just some little lines for his mouth, just to darken that area up. Like that. Rinse and dry that off. And I'm looking at his eyes. I think we might be okay. Please dry yours off if you feel like they're still wet, because obviously it's black and yellow. It's not going to be great. So taking a touch of that yellow, I'm going to really carefully drop some of that in that area there that we left to make his little eyes. There, he's looking a bit cuter, isn't he? Okay, coming back in, I'm just going to take some more of that Payne's Grey, and then in his nostril area, I'm just going to add, whoops, some of that Payne's Grey. Just to darken the nostril area there. And then I'm just going to almost scribble some of that on the top of his nose and just under where that highlight is, just to give that a little bit more depth there. Okay, and then I'm going to take some more Payne's Grey. I'm going to take the excess off, so I want barely any on there, and I'm just going to do the same thing, scribble, 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 around his little eye, and that should make his little eye stand out a little bit. Do the same thing with the other one. So scribble tiny little marks just to finish his eyes off, really. There, it's looking very cute. Okay, so that's his nose on. That's his main area done. Now, the details on our bear. We are going to be using this exact same thin mix of raw umber, and anywhere that we put the details before, so up here on his ears where we went before with the tiny little lines, you can come in again. Now you don't have to do this, it depends how much detail you want on it. You can add a little touch more texture to his little ears, and you can start to take the lines just proud, just the tiniest amount, just proud of his ear shape. I'm going to do the same thing on this ear, adding in a bit more texture, and although it's the same colour that we've already used, because it's another layer, it's going to add a little bit more depth. I'm going to come just proud of the lines on this ear as well, just kind of dabbing really. Just to give him a fuzzy, I'm hoping you can see that on the camera, it's just giving it a little fuzzy edge. And now we can do the same thing wherever you want to add extra texture. You can go over the entire bear, giving him a little bit more texture. Now that we've got all his shadows and everything in. So I'm literally just dib-dabbing little tiny marks. All over his little face, and they're barely there, but we know they're there. So I don't know if you can see the difference. I'm really hoping that you can see the difference. I promise there is one. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, just dabbing little tiny lines, just like we did when we first put his texture on there. All over his little face. Try not to do them in straight lines, and try to keep them in the direction that you think his fur would be going. So if you remember, we did that when we first put the texture on, so just continue in that direction. So these ones are coming kind of this direction. You can go right over the shadows. We can put some on his little muzzle now as well. Now they will show up a little bit more on his muzzle because it's lighter. If you remember, we took the highlights out of his muzzle, so we can put those in. And yeah, just have fun, relax, enjoy the process, and put these little tiny marks. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. If you liked him not looking quite so textured, you could leave him like that. You know, it's your painting, so as you want it. There we go. And I'm just going to continue this. I'm going to go to his foot now, and I'm just going to continue this, add in just a touch more texture anywhere that I feel needs it. And I may speed this part up because I do want my little bear to have some extra texture, and I'm sure you do not want to watch me sitting here putting little tiny spots on his fur. Maybe you do, I don't know. Happy with that. What I'm not happy with is I've missed a little bit just under his nose there, look. Just going to touch that in because that's going to bother me. There we go, that's better. Now, what's next? Okay, before we do this, I want to address these stars. Now, they need to be darker. So I'm going to put a wash of clean water over the surface of first the back star. So just using some clean water and avoiding that edge there, I'm going to put a wash over the entire surface of that star, and then we're going to drop in. Okay, we're going to do this over the entire surface of the star, and then just with the tip of our brush pick up a little bit of that black that we used, and then we're just going to go around the outside edge of our star, dropping in the tiniest amount of black. And that's because this star is meant to be, I think it's wooden. I think that's what it's meant to be. And it just looks a little bit more rustic. Just want it to look a little bit more rustic looking. There, and I think that's made it look a little bit more weathered and rustic. I'm going to do the same thing with the little star, but I'm going to use the burnt umber as a wash. Sorry, not as a wash, on top of the wash. So be careful not to touch what you've just put on. Again, using clean water. Just wet over the entire surface of the star. Like so. And then picking up some of that burnt umber. I've still got a little bit left in my palette. I'm just going to do the same thing, just around the outer edge, because what will happen is it will bleed inwards. And I'm going to rinse off my brush and dry it slightly, and then just going to help that soften that edge. So the centre is a lot lighter, see? That's fab. I'm going to switch down to a smaller brush, my size 5. Just rinse in case there's any residue on there. And now taking the darker, I've only got a tiny bit left, should be just about enough left in my palette. I'm going to run along the edge of the star, preserving the little highlight that we kept when we first did it. So down there like that. And down there like that. And then the same thing with the larger one. So this is almost dry brushing this on, just preserving that tiny light edge that we've got along there. You can roll your brush to get it into a nice pointed tip. And I think I'll just add a touch to the points. These points you can't really see because they get into the blanket, which is not finished yet. There we go, fab. So that's those dealt with. Okay, let's address this this blanket here. What I'm going to do is I am going to wet it with some clear water. I'm going to do one section at a time, so we're going to do this part first. With the tip of the brush, I'm going to go into the black and I'm going to put this shadow in from the star under there. And then I'm just going to randomly drop in really randomly, drop in some patches just to give that a little bit more texture. I am going to rinse and get some more clear water, and I'm going to do the same thing here. I'll wet that down, avoiding these little furry feet, of course. We don't want to disrupt any of that we've just done. And then taking a tiny little bit of the black, we need to reinforce this shadow under the bear. So under there, he's got a quite dark shadow. And I think I'll just put a little touch down there, just to continue with the random texture. And lastly, with some more clear water on this edge over here. Tiniest amount, and just dropping some of that in, no particular order, just to give it a little bit more texture. So we've got shadow there, shadow here, which I think still needs to be darker. So drop a tiny bit more shadow under there. And that is that. I'm going to rinse off, and it's finally time to address this beautiful bow that our bear has got on. And for that, we are going to mix up the palest lemon yellow. So what I'm going to do, I'll tell you what I do. I've got one of these bottles. They were really inexpensive. I got this, I think, on Amazon. I think there was 4 in a pack. And it's really, really handy if you want to make up a really watery wash. And what I will do is I will find an empty space on my palette and I will just squirt some into there, and then I will pick up whatever colour, in this case lemon yellow, and I will have a puddle of the palest wash that you can have. So that's a top tip for you there. And I have spilt a load of water on my picture, so I'll just get rid of that. That's not great. Always keep a piece of kitchen roll handy in case that happens. Teach me if you know it. And this pale yellow, we're going to use this over the whole entire bow, and it's just to give it a tint. That's all we want. We don't really want to colour it, we just want to give it a tint. And I am going to first of all let this all dry off a little bit because I don't want anything merging. So we will come back in a second and we'll give this all a lovely tint with this pale lemon yellow. Lemon yellow hue is the one that I've got, but anything that's pale, very, very pale, doesn't even have to be that colour. You can choose, you could just give him a plain bow if you wish. I just love the detail in this bow, so I'm going to painstakingly I'm going to do it. We've got a few shadows to go in here, but I'm not worried too much about that now. I just want to get this wash of yellow over. So I'm going to come back in a second. I'm just going to let this dry off for a second and continue on and give that a wash over with the yellow, and then it's detail time. Okay, I'm back. Now, I'm going to be using my large brush for this because I want to get this on in a fairly quick sweep. Now obviously you've got to be careful of these little areas here. I mean, for the most part there's a fiddly kind of bit there and this little area around here. If you need to switch to a smaller brush, or if you want to do it all with a smaller brush, that's perfectly fine. I'm just choosing to do it like this. And because this is such a pale wash, we won't of course lose any of those pencil details on there, and I'm not too worried about them showing through because we're going to be literally covering those up anyway, and they shouldn't be too visible. If you're worried about them being too visible, you can of course lighten them up using an kneadable eraser. You can just take some of the graphite off of there. Like I said, I'm not too worried because most of these colours going on here are quite dark, and even if a touch of it does show through, it's a printed bow, so I really wouldn't worry too much. Right, okay, so I'm literally going to sweep across the entire bow area as quick as I can. You don't want to make it too wet, and you don't want to go over the pencil too much. You don't want to scrub at the pencil because it will shift a little bit. Just try and get a nice even tint. I mean, you can barely see it. I can see it. It's going to dry even lighter, obviously. Didn't want to leave it white because it's actually almost like a creamy colour in the picture, so it's not stark white, and I didn't want it to be stark white. There we go. So if you need to tip your picture, if you haven't got it taped down and you need to tip it to see where you've gone, do that. It does help. I'm kind of leaning over mine so I can see where I've been and where I haven't been. It's much easier if it's taped down onto a drawing board at this point, because you can see exactly where it is. So there we go. It's there, but you wouldn't know it was there. But I'm much happier now. It's not the stark white colour. I'm just checking that I've got all around those little edges. And then we are onto the final stage of all this beautiful Christmassy detail on his fabulous bow. So I'm going to let that dry completely, and it really does need to dry completely. Get the hairdryer out, dry it off, because we cannot add all this fine detail at all with any part of this being wet. So dry it off, have fun with your hairdryer, or walk away and have a cuppa. It won't take long to dry, but it definitely needs to be dry. And I'll see you back here in a bit. I am back, and it is time to do the lovely little bow. Now I have enlisted another brush here. This is my De La Rowney Graduate Liner Brush number 10, and I think it's just going to help with some of these tiny details. You can, of course, use your small detail brush if you've got a miniature brush or something like that. It is tiny, depending on how big you've done the picture, of course. But we're going to tackle this in parts. It looks really complicated, but it's really not. We are going to, first of all, get my brushes to stay where they are. I'm actually in the process of making some, air dry clay brush rests. That's just reminded me, because then they wouldn't be rolling away, would they? I'll show you those in another video. Anyway, we need to mix up some colours. Now, on his bow, we have got some red for the berries. We have got some green for I think they're little fir branches. And we have got some brown for the little pine cones, I believe they're meant to be, but this is so small. Now, this does not have to be perfect, okay? We just want to give the indication of what these things are. So, what I want to do is I want to mix up some colours. Now, we want quite a bright green for this bow, and I'm looking now and I'm thinking, let's try some Viridian hue, see what that's like. And that's kind of a bluey. Let's try the emerald. I'm just going to add that to the Viridian, actually, because it's quite a strong colour. It will completely take it over. I think that's what we want, so I'm going to go with the emerald. And this is meant to be a printed bow on him, so we don't need to make these into natural colours. These are really bright colours. And we're going to tackle this in sections. So first of all, I'm going to try and find all of the little fir branches. I'm going to dampen my brush. I'm going to try and locate all the little fir branches, and we're going to do all those first, and then we will do all the berries together, then we'll do all the pine cones together, and that way it's a lot easier to tackle. So first off, I want to do all of the ones that are on the top of the bow. Let's get some of this green going, so I'm going to load this up, and I'm just twisting my brush to get it into a nice fine point. And I'm just going to find these fir branches, and I'm going to put in these tiny little fronds on these fir branches, just like that. So there we go, that's one done. And we're going to come up the middle with a brown afterwards for the stem of this. So the next one I can see is here, and it's kind of curving with the fabric, so put that one in there. Like that. Do apologise if you can hear my dog. My dog is really snoring. This one here. Like so. I will go up the centre for now, but we will come back over there with some brown towards the end. Where's the next one? The next one, I can see a tiny little bit of one down here, so I'll just get a little indication of that being in there. And it looks like there might be another one there. There is one here. I've got my glasses on to do this, because I didn't want to get my head in the way of the camera, very, very close to it. Just under here there's just one side of one you can see there, so I'll just get that in there. And working upwards, the next one is here. And then here. And there's not many more, to be honest. There's one up here. I'm squinting at the picture now. There's kind of a little bit of one there. I think there's a tiny, tiny one. Almost just one side of one there. And there's one I haven't actually drawn in, but I can see it kind of living there. There is one down here I've missed. And I'm just having a quick scan around, checking my pencil marks. So I can't see any more on the pencil marks, and I cannot see any more. So that is it. That is all of those little pine leaves in. So how easy was that? So I'm going to rinse my brush off, and we are going to mix up some red for the berry. Now I think for this I'm going to go with alizarin crimson because it's such a lovely colour. So we're going to mix, oh yeah, that's lovely. I'm going to mix some of that. That is the perfect berry colour. We don't want this too thin. We want this to be a bright, bright, bright red. Now there's two options here. You can either use your little spotter brush, which I'm going to do, or if you've got one, you can use one of these tools. Now I've got a few different ones of these. I've got these on Amazon actually. They've got the spots on one end and they've got the little rubber silicone tips that I use for my masking fluid. These are really inexpensive. I've also got this one. I've had this one for years. I used to use this with Fimo clay and all sorts of things. I think they're meant to be for nail artists, aren't they? But you can use this if, you know, we've got these little tiny berries there. You could just dot those on. You know, that would probably be the quickest option. I'm not going to go with the quickest option. I'm going to go with my spotter brush. I'm going to pick some of that lovely red berry colour up. And I am just going to, first of all, I can see where my little berries are on here. So I'm first of all just going to follow my pencil marks and put these berries on. So I'm going to start over this side, and anywhere I can see these little tiny berries, I am popping them in. Now remember, this is on fabric, so you don't have to be absolutely perfectly precise. Right, I'm going to rinse out my brush. Right, let's continue. Continue on with these berries. So I'm just looking at my pencil marks, where those little circles are, and dropping those in. There are quite a few berries, unfortunately, so it'll take you a minute to do this, but it really is not too bad. It's quite therapeutic, actually, putting these little tiny marks on here. I've got some there. I believe this is a little cluster of berries here. One there. once I've done all the marks I can see, I will have a quick look at the picture and very possibly discover that I've put them all completely in the wrong place. But it really does not matter. I think that's all the ones I can actually see. Is there some more there? There is. Okay, I've just looked at the picture and there is a little bunch there. You can see some more there. Right, let's have a quick look at the picture. So, okay, we've got this little cluster here. We've got one single one there. There's a few there. So that's some more there. Yeah, that's some more there. And I am sure I've put many in the wrong place. But I really do not mind. Can't see any more there. Right, let's come up to this area. We've got those ones there. Those ones there. Oh, there's a few little ones going up into the crease of the bow that we can't actually see yet. And there are, I didn't draw these ones in, but we'll just put an indication of some on his little piece on his neck there. And I think that is probably it for now for those. Right, I'm going to rinse my brush off. I am going to come and get some burnt umber. So that's the darkest of the brown that we were using earlier. And I'm just going to mix up a little tiny bit of that because we need some for the stems of these little berries and the little fir branches that we just did. So I'll just mix up a little bit of that there. And I'm going to now use my liner brush to pick up some of that brown. And I'm just going to come up the centre of those fir leaves, and I'm going to give them a little bit of a stem as well. So just like that, up the centre. Like so. And we'll do that on all of the little branches that we put in, which really wasn't that many, so it won't take us a minute to do that. That's like half of one there. I think that's all of them. So that was good, that didn't take very long. Okay, and I'm not sure why I just rinsed my brush off because we need some more of that, although I might thin it down a bit actually for the, just add a little water so it's a little more fluid, and it'll also lighten it up a touch. And we're just now going to come in and put the branches on these berries. Now I wouldn't worry too much. We basically want to connect the little berries to a branch. That's all we're doing. So go. Just give them a little stem so they look like they're not floating. Not even sure which way some of these are going, but nevertheless, we will endeavour to put them on. And this is the fun part. I'm looking forward to this part. Putting these little details on here. So just go around and put these little connecting arms on these tiny little winter berries. Have I missed any? And not forgetting these little tiny ones on his little bow under his neck. I think I've got them all. Pretty sure I do. So that's that part done. Oh no, look, I've missed the tiny little group there. An even tinier branches. Fab. Okay, what have we got left? We have got little tiny holly leaves. Now, I'm gonna just add a touch of hooker's green. Not using that brush, I'm not. I'm gonna add a touch of hooker's green to this green mix that we've already got going on. Just so it's a slightly different green. I mean, you could carry on in the green that we've got there, to be fair, but I'm going to pick up some of that green and we're going to just find all the holly leaves. Now, I'm not going to bother looking again. I'm just going to follow. I can see where some of these holly leaves are. So I'm literally outlining the shape, filling it in with the green, and then we can come back and put detail on if we want, or leave it as is, as long as the shape is there. Just the edge of one in here, and that's the edge of another one there. And that looks like that might be one there. There's definitely one there. That is definitely one there. Just, I'm not being careful at all, as you can see. This is not time to just want to get this finished. And we're just, like I said before, we're giving an indication of what's there. I mean, when you look at it, you can tell it's berries. You can tell by the shape of the leaves that they're meant to be holly leaves. Nobody's going to be examining it to see if you've missed a bit on your leaf or, you know, don't worry about it too much. Oops. I think this is meant to be a leaf. Oops, that one didn't even look like a holly leaf, but there we go. Can there. Okay, and I can see there is an indication of one here. So I'll just put a little kind of touch of green there to indicate that there's something there. There is apparently another one over here. And it's going the opposite way, so obviously didn't draw that one in or rubbed it out too much. There is, let's have a look. There is one on the edge here. And there is a, oh no, I've done that one. Curved in. There's one under here, but this is where his bow is going into a knot, so you can't really tell what's there. So I would just put in some dib dabs of green there, because I think that is a fir branch there. Because you can't really see where the knot is, what that is at all. So let's just have a look. I've missed another bit of a fir branch there. It's just on the edge. Okay, so there's no more. Yes, there is. There's a tiny little one in the corner there. And there is, now this part here is all dark, it's shadow because it's underneath. So there should be two holly leaves here. There should be one that way, and there should be one going the other way, but I can't quite fit it in. So I'll just squeeze it in there, and got that one in there. I think there needs to be something here. I think that should have been berries, but I'm done with the berries, so I'm going to put a holly leaf in there. In this area is mostly pine cones, I think. So I'm just going to give the indication of a little one there. And I think that that might be it. I'm just going to pick up a little bit of that brown. There. Okay, so last but not least is our lovely pine cones, and to do these we're going to use some of that raw umber, is it raw? Yeah, raw umber that we've used for our bear. This is a good way to tie the colours in. It's always good if you can tie them in. And anywhere there's a pine cone, which is showing as a large circle, I'm just going to drop some of that raw umber in. Again, at the moment I'm just going by what I can see on my drawing. That obviously is a pine cone up there. And there's quite a big one that I haven't drawn in here, so I'll just put that in. So just like little brown eggs at the moment. Okay, there's one. There is now anyway. And it's going to be one living there. And up on this area here, there's one that's kind of squished into the bow and it's squashed. So I'm just going to put a little oblong shape in there. I think there's one kind of squashed in on the fold. So we'll do that there. And what the heck, we'll put a little indication of one there. And this is a fold here as well, so we'll put one just going under there. And we're going to put all these folds and creases in afterwards. So once you've got the brown eggs in, we can then come in. Now don't do this on the wet ones. Start from where you started, if you know what I mean. And we're just going to put a little pine cone shapes on there. So little dots, really. And a little stem. And we're going to do that on every one that we can see. Not too sure which way this one's meant to be going, so we'll do it kind of this way. Like that. And just continue around. Putting your little pine cones on. It's kind of half of a pine cone here. So this one we can't see at all, so it's going to be random kind of marks there. Oh, there's one there. And there's almost one there. Was that all of them? I think it was. I think that was all of them. Yeah, I can't see any more. Right, so I can see, looking at my picture, that this area's got quite a bit of space, and here, and I can see here has got a little bit of space, so I'm just going to randomly add in, using the colours that we've already used, anywhere I can see a space, and I think maybe we could even it out a little bit. We don't want any big spaces, you know. So, so I'm just filling in the spaces. I think that's enough of those. I'm going to pick up a little bit of the red, and I think he needs a friend there. This is kind of underneath him, so I'm just going to put some little berries on there maybe. Not really many berries in this area, so I'll add a few there, there. That's better. And I think just under his chin there, the one thing he doesn't have on his little neck is a little pine cone, so I'm just going to put a little indication of a pine cone there. And I'm going to pick up a little tiny bit of this dark brown, and just where I've just added those berries, I'm going to just go in and give them a little bit of a stalk, so they're not floating around. There we go, I think that was all of them. Okay, and there's his little pine cone under his little neck. Now you're probably thinking, oh my goodness, all that detail, what is she doing? And you'd be right. But how fab does that look? It does look fab, doesn't it? Now all we've got to do is add in really shadow details and things like that. So I am just going to go back to my liner brush, and I'm going to reactivate my Payne's Grey, and then I'm going to take some over here, and I'm going to really water it down so it's barely there. It's almost just grey. Okay, and I am just going to very carefully take some of that around the outside of this lovely festive bow. And now this part here is curling around, so it's up there like that, and then it's curling around in there. Now because it's curling around, it's in shadow there, so you can take some more of that and just deepen that up in there to indicate a little shadow. And now we're going to come along this edge here, and this is the bit that's a little bit complicated. It's going to come around there like that. And then up here we've got some shadow. And then we've got another kind of curl and crease that comes kind of up there like that. And we've got some more shadow there, so we're going to just plonk that in with some of that grey. Okay, now this part here where the knot is, this is actually where the knot is, so this is the knot here. And then it comes around there. And so this part here is in shadow, so don't do this unless your top layer is dry, obviously. I'm going to put some shadow under his chin there. And there is a crease that's kind of folding into a little kind of oval shape there. And then it comes down there. Now we can go around that edge. At this point you can add a little bit more shadow on this area because that wasn't quite dark enough when we put that in there earlier. I'm going to mix up some more of this watery mix. So that's that bit. We've done that loop that comes down there, and then the bow comes, oops, around there. And down there like that. So what we need to do now is just go around the very, very edge. And this is like a line of stitching. Just come follow the edge of that down there. Now here there is a fold in the fabric that is kind of coming down there, and this is all in shadow, so you can darken that down a bit. Going to come down this edge. Around there. And now follow this down. Don't forget this is going to dry a lot lighter. And we have got a bit of a bend in the fabric going on here, so I'm just going to put that indication in there. Right, what's going on over this side? We've got a line to follow around there and all the way down this edge. And there is a fold fabric there, so that's a shadow. There we go. And I think the biggest shadow of all is this one here. Well, aside from that one there, which is all shadow. But the one in the fabric is this one here. So there's a big curve that comes up like that. And then you can just add that shadow in there. Like that. And add a bit of a shadow on that kind of edge there. And then this section here is like a separate, it's like almost like a separate little part that's underneath, and that also, because it's underneath, is in shadow, so darken that down a bit. This section comes under there. Darken that little bit down under there. Okay. Over there like that. And like I said, this is all shadow here, so just roughly going to put that in there. And this kind of comes over, folds there. So we're almost done. We've got this fold that comes down there. And then we're just going to go around this outer edge. Like so. And I'm just going to darken that little line there. And then of course, under his little chin, it's quite shadowed. And I think we may be done. Now you could, of course, if you wanted to be really fancy schmancy, go around and put all the stitching on the edge. I'm not going to do that on this occasion. I normally would, but this poor little bear has been sat for so long that I don't want to put him through it. So I think I'm going to call that done then. as you can see, I'm just using this shadow colour just to darken around his eyes a touch, just to set them back a little bit more. And anywhere you think needs to go back a little bit more, you can do that. I'm going to stop fiddling because otherwise I will be here all night. But I'm really happy with how he turned out. I hope you enjoyed it. If I do decide to put some circles on there, I will show you in the community tab. But the last thing to do, of course, is to remove the tape and sign your name. So if I can just make myself a little bit of space here. I'm a bit worried about how easily this this tape is going to come off, to be honest, because it's been here for quite a while. Now, when you take your tape off, if you're worried about how firmly it's stuck, heat it up with a hairdryer and then take it off. Works every time. I'm not going to do that because it is quite late and I don't want to put the hairdryer on. But always tear away from your picture. Okay, anyway. There's one. See if I can find the edge and get it going. Just really gently just pull it away from the edge of the picture. Okay, this is all going far too well. And last but not least, yay! And there we go. I've really enjoyed doing that, and I wish I'd finished him sooner. I mean, it's just been a bit of a chaotic time in the house. We've also had new windows and doors put in, and yeah, it's been a bit chaotic. But he's done. You totally love him. I don't know if I will put any circles in. I feel like he's kind of magical enough as he is, but let me know anyway, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave your comments below, and more importantly than that, if you could, just a few seconds to hit the thumbs up button. I know you hear all the YouTubers saying it. It does help me so much because it puts the video out to more people, and more people is more views, and I am struggling with views at the moment. But yeah, that will help me so much, and I really, really do appreciate it. And hit the subscribe button if you've not already done so. And feel free to leave a comment. I love to read all your comments, and I do try and answer every single one of them. So thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. And there will be news coming on the community page soon, so keep an eye on that as well. And that's it. Bye for now. Bye.